Do the Unwithered animatronics exist? Months ago, I briefly touched on this topic. There's never been a mystery that's gotten me flip-flopping this much before, apart from whether the Unwithereds existed or not, but that argument will resolve itself with the second movie, so I'll hold off on that one for now. Throughout the week of the 10th anniversary, the movie designs have been shown off, and when combined with some of the other stuff that recently dropped, we finally have a pretty clear answer to this once unsolvable mystery. My reasoning at the time of that prior claim was that since the second movie is going to be a sequel to the first, then the state of the animatronics would tell us what logic Scott is using for their designs. If they look like the classic animatronics but broken, then it'll mean Scott cares too much about design consistency to make them completely different without a canon explanation. But if they shapeshift between movies into the Withered designs, then Scott doesn't see the design change as something that needs to be explained, and thus there are no Unwithereds. Looking at the teasers, we can see pieces that clearly belong to the Withered variants of Bonnie, Foxy, Freddy, and Chica. We also see renders of Withered Freddy and Withered Foxy taped to the wall for reference. Now, since the movie isn't actually out yet and we don't know the story, this isn't definitive proof yet. They could get changed into the Unwithereds, get destroyed, and become the Withereds within the movie. Or they could coexist with the classics as separate animatronics. It's an alternate universe after all, so if they want to explain the design change, then the only limit is their imagination. It's actually something else during the anniversary week that made me even consider making this video, and that something is the new game, Into the Pit. In this game, we see an animation featuring Unwithered Freddy in a segment of gameplay taking place in 1985, 2 years before the second game with the Withered animatronics. So, case closed then, right? The Unwithered animatronics did exist. Well, not so fast. Chica and Bonnie are their classic selves in their jump scares, albeit with upper teeth like in a strangely large amount of merch. And more importantly, if you slow down Freddy's jump scare, you can see him start as classic Freddy, morph into Unwithered Freddy, and then morph back into classic Freddy. If they can change designs in the same animation, mere frames apart from each other, then I don't see how it can be denied that they're supposed to be interchangeable. Unless, of course, it's an animation error. So, if you're not convinced, let's go through all the other evidence that these two designs are, in fact, interchangeable. But first, let me explain what exactly I even mean when I say interchangeable. Let's take a quick detour to something that, at first, will seem completely unrelated to this discussion, but I promise it'll wrap back around soon enough, though. I think most people know about the animated series Steven Universe. Even if you've never watched it, I bet you've heard of it. But what you might not know is that when it was on the air, there was a crowd of people who got really, really angry about design consistency within the show. Every time a character's look changed between shots or even between episodes, they'd point it out as an error. But what they didn't understand is that these inconsistencies weren't errors, they were by design. It's a little more complicated than this, but the short version is that a lot of different artists worked on the show, and each had a slightly different art style. The creator of the series wanted to encourage these people to interpret the characters in the way that each of them wanted. So instead of having to follow a model sheet to keep the characters looking correct, they told the animators overseas to animate the characters exactly as they looked on the storyboards, rather than cleaning them up to match the model sheets. Five Nights at Freddy's essentially follows the 3D equivalent of this philosophy. Scott will use whichever 3D model he feels best fits the situation he's portraying. In the second game, he wanted the animatronics to look really ugly, so he changed the designs to reflect that vision. In the third game, he wanted them to look innocent in the ending screens, so he used the classic designs there. But then he wanted them to look ugly as the Phantoms, so he used the Withered designs for those. Except Chica for whatever reason. It's also a matter of convenience. Showing the Withered animatronics pre-1987 would require Scott to make a new model, and the characters have never been shown in a 3D environment in that time period long enough to justify making the new models for it. So, because the Unwithereds and the classics are meant to be the same thing in-universe, he just uses the classic models. Alright, with that explanation out of the way, let's get into why I believe this to be the case. You know, other than the Freddy animation that I already talked about. And there is a lot, and I mean a lot of evidence for this. To keep it simple, I'll just go in chronological order. In the Follow Me minigames in FNAF 3, we see sprites that most closely match the Unwithered designs after FNAF 1, which is kind of impossible if they're not the same thing as the classic design. The plushie designs flip-flop between the classic and Unwithered designs in FNAF 4. In the minigames, the plushies have the buttons from the Unwithered designs, and in the gameplay, they have the bare chests of the classic designs. Even the Fredbear plushie falls victim to this in Sister Location. In the Silver Eyes, we get descriptions of the animatronics as they were when Henry created them. And while the descriptions for Freddy, Bonnie, and Foxy aren't specific enough to tell which variant they are, Chica's description is. Chica the chicken was more bulky and had an apprehensive look, thick black eyebrows arched over her purple eyes, and her beak slightly open, revealing teeth, as she held out a cupcake on a platter. Withered Chica's beak can't be slightly open. It's the entire bottom half of her face. And, you know, the classic animatronics are shown on the original cover that was designed by Scott himself. FNAF World combines classic Freddy and Unwithered Freddy into one character. He's shaped like classic Freddy rather than Withered Freddy, but he's got Withered Freddy's top teeth and buttons. From Pizzeria Simulator onward, Fazbear Entertainment's logo uses the two Freddy designs interchangeably. Sometimes it shows Unwithered Freddy, and sometimes it shows classic Freddy. Scott commissioned artwork of a classic Chica shell with a Withered-era endoskeleton for the survival logbook. I think this was supposed to be a teaser for the fourth closet, but I'm not 100% sure about that. The point is that the artwork implies that the Withered and classic parts can fit together seamlessly. The repair minigames in Help Wanted are pretty heavily implied to take place shortly after the missing children incident. Bonnie's guitar is having issues, just like in the employee sketchbook, and his face opening up offers an explanation for how it was cleanly removed during his time as Withered Bonnie. Chica is attracting roaches, as if something inside of her is rotting. Freddy has a child's hat and watch inside of him, implying a kid was recently in there. And the Foxy minigame ends with Hand Unit saying Pirate Cove can be reopened, which according to the week before is something that never happens again after the Bite of 87. Also, the FNAF 2 levels in Help Wanted originally replaced Withered Foxy with Classic Foxy, but they eventually swapped him back in an update adding all the Withered animatronics due to popular demand. Scott was comfortable with them using Classic Foxy until that point though. The endoskeletons in Into the Pit are a weird mix between Endo 01 and Endo 02. But then in the sketchbook, we only see Endo 01, as if they're meant to be the same thing. And that's in addition to all the stuff I already pointed out before from this game. The week before makes two references to the classic animatronics as the originals, stating that they restored the vintage Freddy animatronic with his classic look, and that the posters in the East Hall are vintage character posters. And that's it. As you can imagine, trying to create a canon explanation that accounts for all of this would lead to an utter train wreck. Trust me, I tried before writing this version of the script, and it was neither fun to write nor interesting to listen to. Although if anyone else wants to give it a try, I won't stop you.